Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. So today we are doing another episode of the King Chronicles, and this is one that I'm really excited to do because it marks the beginning of our foray into the Dark Tower. So when I first began scripting out my general thoughts for this particular video, I realized that the Dark Tower is really at the center of so much of Stephen King's work. And I started thinking about how impossible it's going to be to do like shorter videos without doing a deep dive into the Dark Tower. Well, I decided that for the Dark Tower books, I am going to be creating two separate videos. The reason for that being is because I'm sure that there are going to be people who just want to know the general things that I cover within the King Chronicles without having that deep dive into the series as a whole. And so I decided that I would be creating two separate videos, one for the King Chronicles series, which is just going to be the basics. We're still going to talk about fun facts, characters, plot, all of those things, my thoughts and connections to previously published Stephen King's works. And then I will also be doing a completely separate series on the Dark Tower in general. So I don't have a name yet. That's okay. I have time to figure it out, but it's going to consist of, I believe there's 8 books. So I think it's going to be a total of 10 episodes. One installment for each book, as well as just a generalized introduction and then kind of like an outro where we wrap everything up together. In those particular videos, we'll be going in depth into the Dark Tower, into the universe as a whole, every specifics to the Dark Tower, as well as talking about the connections across the wider King multiverse. In those videos, I will be talking about how the books connect to each other. Dark Tower lore, specifics of, Midworld and various other things. Those are things that I will be skipping in our King Chronicles videos. It's just too much. Those videos will be coming out at the same time as the King Chronicles for that corresponding book. So for example, while I'm talking about the Gunslinger today, I will be releasing after this, so you will be seeing after this, the very first video for the Dark Tower series. Also, if you have any suggestions for the names, definitely comment down below and let me know. I would love to take your suggestions because I'm terrible at this sort of thing. So we have talked about that. So just know that this is going to be a little bit more condensed as far as the Dark Tower is concerned. So we're still going to be talking about the book and how it relates and all that sort of thing. So, all right, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into this. So we always start out with fun facts on the book. This was actually originally published in 1982, and it was originally published as what is called a fix-up novel, and it was short stories that were related that were all just bound up together. And those were published between 1978 and 1981. And they were all published in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. The original publication was made up of 5 parts, and the updated and revised edition still maintains those 5 parts, but they are the Gunslinger, the Way Station, the Oracle in the Mountains, the Slow Mutants, and the Gunslinger and the Dark Man. The book was revised in 2003, and it carries the subtitle of Resumption, and this is the version that's still in publication today. If you are unaware, the story and its characters are actually inspired by Robert Browning's poem, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. He wanted to write a novel that had the similar feel to that particular poem, and he actually began working on this back in 1970 when he was still in college. One thing that I didn't know until I actually started doing the research for this book is that originally the book Together, as we previously established, was published in 1982. They did a very limited paperback print run because it was a work of fantasy, and at that point, I believe King was sort of, typecasted, or, he was pigeonholed into horror. Pet Sematary was published the following year. We know that one did very, very well. Well, on the cover blurb of Pet Sematary, they had the author of The Gunslinger. And fans began calling into the publisher going, what is the Gunslinger and why can't I find it anywhere? So they actually ended up doing more print runs because of that. And obviously it remains in print to this day. So those are the fun facts. So let's talk about how I felt about this particular book. One of the things that I see so often about this book is the fact that it's boring. I think out of the entire series, this has to be most people's least favorite, and I absolutely understand why. And I will say, if you have tried to dive into the world of Dark Tower and stopped after Gunslinger, I urge you to read on. At least read Drawing of the Three. I think that that's the book where we really start to see Roland and who he is, as well as meeting the rest of the players that will be so important throughout the rest of the series. So I really hate when people tell me like, oh, it gets good after the first book, but I will say that you don't have to read 6 books before this series gets good. You just really have to get past the Gunslinger, in my opinion anyway. One of the things that I love about this series and this book really is the blending of genres. So you have, obviously, it is a fantasy series. It was actually one of the first fantasy series that I ever read all the way through, adult fantasy series anyway. And I'll talk about that more in a different video, but the blending of genres. So obviously, as I just said, it's fantasy, but there is a like real Western quality. You can tell that King was heavily influenced by the fact that he really loved Westerns. And then of course there's your traditional horror elements that are sprinkled throughout the book as well. And I think that he just does such a great job of blending all of these things and really making it make sense. Because when you think about all of those things together, like it doesn't really feel like they should work, but it does. To me, also, the writing in this book feels different, unlike some of his other work. And it really feels like the beginning of just something that is going to be absolutely epic. Maybe I feel that way because I've read this series so many times through, and just because of the general love that I have for it. I'm sure that people reading it the first time probably wouldn't get that, but again, I do because I love it as much as I do. You could argue that the writing in this is a little dry, and I think that that has to do with Roland's character. This is the very beginning, and we are learning that per Roland's background, he is the last gunslinger. He has lost everyone in his quartet. He is searching for the man in black, and he has been searching for a very, very long time. We don't exactly know how old he is. We know that he presents as middle-aged, but apparently he is far older because as the tower fails, time becomes more and more unreliable. And I think that Roland has been by himself for a really long time, and we see that as the story progresses, and as we meet one of our other main characters, Jake, we do start to see him change. And I'll talk a little bit more about that whenever, we go into the character section, which still won't be very long. But I think that the overall feel of this book is, it's dry because Roland is dry, and it's because we haven't gotten to the core of the story yet. This is the introduction to the character. It's the introduction to the world. It's the introduction to his backstory, and really letting you know what our story is going to be about going forward. But we don't really get the gist of what is going to happen to come, and really get a better idea of Roland's personality until book 2. So yeah, it's difficult to read, just again because of that dryness, but if you push through it, it gets a lot better. One of the things that I really love about this series is the parallels into our own world. There is technology, there are mutations in people and in livestock that seem to resemble like radiation poisoning or radiation sickness, mutations caused by that, some sort of nuclear attack. There are just little bits and scraps of things that we recognize in our own world in this setting that is completely unlike our own. Like at one point, somebody is singing Hey Jude by the Beatles, which begs the question, how do they know that song? And this is something that we will continue to see as we go throughout the series. But I remember my first read through of this book being so intrigued, because we talk about a world that has moved on, but what did they move on from? Why did they move on? It raises a lot of questions, and I think that is one of the things that made me want to read further. And I also think that the more that I read, especially in chronological order, King's body of work, I think that I'm going to come to appreciate this series even more, because I do know that it really becomes the center of the King multiverse. I'm really looking forward to seeing those things and gaining a better appreciation of those things. So there are really only 3 characters that we're going to talk about today, because there's really only 3 characters within this particular book that matter at all. So obviously we have Roland, and we have talked about him a little bit already. He is a skilled gunslinger. He is a man of few words. He is the last gunslinger, and he is on a quest for the Dark Tower. He is also on a quest for his search for the Man in Black, who is our second major player. He is said to resemble Clint Eastwood, again, a very clear influence of the Westerns that King loved. Through the flashbacks that we see throughout the book, we learn that Roland is hard-headed, he is stubborn, and he is willing to do whatever it is that needs to be done to do, number one, the thing that he thinks is right, but also do whatever he needs to do in his quest for the Dark Tower. His quest and being on his own for so long have made him really difficult to be around, because again, he has been on his own for so long. But when we're introduced to Jake, we do begin to see him soften. And I think because he is so sullen and so hard, it's one of the reasons that people tend to not enjoy this book as much, which again, I understand. But I think that makes his character arc as you continue through the series just that much more satisfying. Next, we're going to talk about the Man in Black, who admittedly doesn't have very much screen time in the book itself, but he is one of the most important players. Not only is he one of the most important players, but he makes up a part of the opening line of this book, which in my opinion is one of the most awesome opening lines in any book or any series ever. The Man in Black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. I love that. I want that on a t-shirt. Which I've seen Dark Tower t-shirts, but I don't own any. There's a couple other lines in the series that I also really love, but so again, while the Man in Black is not someone that we spend a whole lot of time with, we know that he is instrumental to the wider plot of the story. He pushes Roland on into the rest of his quest, into our book 2, The Drawing of the Three. He is a man of many names. Walter Odem believed that he was Merlin at one point as well. He is a character that we see pop up over and over again, and in fact is a character that we have seen before now, and that is in The Stand. And we see, as we learn more about Roland's backstory, that the Man in Black has had a hand in Roland's fate from the very beginning of his own life. And while his role is mostly finished here, he is a character that we will meet again in various forms and fashions as we continue on through our journey, not only to the tower, but through our body of work. And the very last character who bears talking about would be Jake. And Jake is a young boy who Roland meets at a way station where he stops on his quest to catch up to the Man in Black. Don't really know where Jake came from. And through hypnosis, we are able to learn that it seems like Jake was killed in a previous life and ended up there. But we don't really know how. We don't know how these worlds are connected. And so Jake doesn't want to stay at the way station, and Roland agrees to bring him along. Jake becomes a surrogate son to Roland as they travel together. And it's interesting because, again, we've gone through up until this point, Roland is kind of a shithead. He's a hard ass. He doesn't have much of a personality, and we do start to see just a little bit of that personality. And we see even more of his personality, and we realize just how ruthless he can be when in the, under the mountains with the slow mutants. He is given the chance to either save Jake or to continue on his journey. and he chooses to continue on his journey to the Dark Tower. One of my favorite lines from the series as a whole, not just the very opening line to the series, but as Jake is about to plummet to his death, he says, "Go then. There are other worlds than these." And that just, I love it. They're so, I cannot express how much I just love that line and that sentiment, and especially seeing how, as we continue through the Dark Tower, seeing how that's going to come back to us. It's so good. It's so, so good. So Jake is, as I said, a character that we will continue to see in the series. And while his role in this one seems like it's a small one, he's not in the book for very long. It is instrumental. It really starts to give Roland just a little bit more depth. And we're really getting to know him just a little bit more. So he is important. So as far as connections, because this book started being worked on in 1970, I was hard pressed to find very many connections. And one of the only ones that I could find was obviously the Man in Black, who translates to the Man in Black from The Stand, which we have already talked about. Yes, because The Stand was published in the 70s. But other than that, I wasn't able to really find very many other connections to our universe. There will be many, 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 many connections to the Gunslinger and other Dark Tower books as we go, but if we're taking this book and looking at previously published works, I couldn't really find any. If I missed some, which is very likely, definitely point them out in the comments below. Let me know. But yeah, that is the Gunslinger. Like I said, I'm super, super excited to continue on with this series. I'm really excited to get started on the Dark Tower series itself. I think the process of going through and creating these videos is going to be a lot of fun, and doing research and taking notes, like especially on something that I am interested in, is something that I really enjoy. So not only is this nice for you guys who are enjoying the content, it's nice for me because I'm enjoying creating the content. So there's that. All right, but that is all I have for you guys today. Have you read The Gunslinger? How do you feel about The Gunslinger? Are you excited about the Dark Tower series? The series of videos that I'm going to be creating? Comment down below and let me know. If you are new here, hi, hello, and welcome. If you like what you see and you want to see more, you can click thumbs up. You can hit subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find in the down bar below all of my socials. You can get at me on Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram. And you can also find a plethora of other ways that you can support me if you so choose. As I said, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to take a quick break because you're going to see my face again here soon, because we are going to get right into this Dark Tower series. So until next time, thank you guys so very much for watching. Bye.